Hi, my name is Lisa Brody, and everybody watches AccessTV.org. Peace.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Do it like this. Ba-boom. Ba-boom. Do it like that. Yeah. Ba-boom.
This is Jonathan Small again doing the Small Report. Today is August the 29th, 2012, broadcasting live from the downtown studios of AccessTV.org, and I'm really looking forward for doing this report today. I believe this is my favorite report up until this point. Highly anticipated for this particular report show that we do every single day, but this one is a little bit more special. Kind of got an inspiration last night taking a look at a picture that was called The Streets that was basically broadcast from Philadelphia. I recommend everybody, if they get the chance, to get a look at this particular movie that was done. It was shown on BET network, and basically it was a realistic movie. But the one thing that kind of stood out, what I want to talk about today, is the definition of the so-called subculture that exists. Now, some people might feel there's no such thing of a real subculture that exists in our society. But when you find a group of people talking and acting in one particular form that's not normal to the traditional behavior patterns, I don't know what else you need to call it. In some segments of the young generation, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical or negative, but I've had older people, one older person has even told me one particular time that he can barely understand how some of these hip hoppers talk. I'm not talking about rapping now, I'm talking about a general dialogue, a general conversation. To him, it's almost like they're speaking a foreign language. Now again, if you listen or you watch this movie, The Streets, and they do edit many of the bad language and the foul language, so you're not really getting the full extent of the conversation. But the style and the dialect, the way they express themselves, is a little bit different. Is it a form of a subculture, the way they act? Smoking weed, looking to kill people. It was a real hardcore movie. But it kind of transforms to what we have all throughout our country. You know, you have different forms of different cultures and different subcultures. You have two Caribbean islands in Jamaica and Haiti that has the closest assimilation of their culture tied towards Africa that you will find anywhere else in the world. There's a difference in the culture between American and England, between American and the Caribbean and Canada. So there's all different forms of different cultures. But to say within the United States you have a different form of a subculture that exists, mostly people would say your younger generations in your 20s and your 30s, but it can even transform beyond that. A different form of a behavioral pattern. Maybe it's not a true word subculture. Maybe it's something different even beyond the subculture, but it is something that they do act and present themselves a little different than a normal traditional way. I mean, if you're wearing your pants half down, you're behind, and you can't speak no more than 2 sentences without using consistent foul language, you can't hold down a general conversation. You have to get up in the morning and smoke weed and drink beer and other forms of alcohol just to get started. You can't think about or function in a normal traditional economy. You can't seem to interact with your family without being disrespectful. I mean, there's a lot of different versions on how you can look at this pattern, but it is something that exists. And I don't think the movie was just a made-up version of trying to get a group of actors together and present a false realization. I think there's a segment of a population that do portray themselves and do interact in this particular form. Clearly, you might criticize networks like BET of giving this negative side of an image, but still, it's a realistic version. I kind of would like to address one issue towards challenging people the differences of a culture. I did mention Africa, the Caribbean. I've been to the Caribbean several times. The difference, if you was to look at, let's say, Miami, Florida, and that's the closest geographical region in the United States, or one of the closest to some forms of the Caribbean. And you would challenge the people that's growing up in an area in Miami called Liberty City. It has one of the worst reputations, one of the worst realistic problems that you can find in Miami. A very high crime rate, a very high drug problem, no sense of economic development, no sense of networking on international trade like other parts of Miami. And you give those youth who've never been probably outside really of the city, but most of their time is really consumed in the geographical region or the area that they live at. Understanding you have an economic structure that exists that will keep you realistically from living or interacting, doing business from other parts of a certain city on a consistent level. Some of our leaders, even like Dr. Kuba Asagai, who has a world knowledge vision of what could be instrumental towards an asset on a universal level, if you gave some of those youth the opportunity or the option or the choices to say, well, look, you've been in Liberty City your entire life. You see crime, you see drugs, you see no hope. You don't seem that you can benefit like Coral Gables, the affluent section that has international trade. Would you consider going to Montego Bay, Jamaica, which is about just over an hour flight, a tourist city, a commercial type of city that has a lot of commercial development, a different culture, to be perfectly honest? And would you want to be able to interact in this part of the Caribbean and feel like you can set up a partnership and you can set up a networking source? Because you have a very high Caribbean population, Jamaicans, Haitians, and definitely Cubans directly in Miami. But provide another alternative for this segment of the population that seems to have no sense of high expectations. I don't know what the answer would be. I mean, it's definitely a foreign country. You have to definitely get into some realizations that you're dealing with a different currency levels, you're dealing with a different political system. But I don't know if you're really connected in Liberty City. I'm just using Liberty City like I'm using the movie The Streets that was broadcast in Philadelphia as one particular example. This could be a national trend that you could look into. Would those people be better off spending some time in a different country? Going to Africa is a lot further, costs a lot more money, and you definitely get a full extent of a different culture there, but that might be a little bit more harder to put the money together. Would you think the leadership of the people would advocate trying to let a group of people from that section go to that Caribbean island? It's always usually Jamaica, Haitians, and other islands, the Bahamas, coming to South Florida, and only people who travel, for family reasons and tourist reasons go to the Caribbean. Would there be a sense of setting up a real networking source to look into a large-scale partnership? Because the subculture problem that exists is a realistic problem that we are not really able to always come to an understanding of how you go about dealing with it. You don't want to see your youth growing up as teenagers falling through the social economic cracks, getting dependencies and not being monitored and developed in a particular pattern that they can reach their full potential. When you get into now breaking the law, now it's a whole different story just to have a different so-called subculture. But when you watch a movie like this movie that took place, The Streets in Philadelphia, I just want to keep calling to make sure you understand what I'm talking about. When you start to be carrying guns and shooting and killing people, and you have no consciousness on why you're doing what you're doing, to easily pick up a gun and say you got a beef with somebody, obviously drugs could be the main focal point, but it could be just a disrespect or a hate that you have for somebody else. Do you put that in a category of having a subculture differences, or is that just a criminal problem? Yeah, it's a crime problem. There's no doubt about it. You're breaking the law. But I think at the same time, you want to examine some of your root causes why you're having these problems from generation to generation. There's always been a segment of our younger society that will act different and be rebellious towards the older or the general society. You can go to the rock and roll days. You can even go back to Cab Calloway, that they had their style of how they interacted and they did things probably unethical at times, and the younger people looked at them, in the sense of uh, models or role models. Cab Calloway was a very popular singer during his days. The slick hair, the rhyming so-called skits that they called it. But I think now when you get into breaking the law and being caught up into this subculture structure that exists, that seems like is this a system that we, or society that we want to have people acting and behaving this way? Are we creating a market? Certainly the hip hop game is a thriving market in the entertainment arena, but do you want the negative images, and you want to promote this as the only form that you can market, that you can get into movies and film and videos and television, to say that you have to act like this to really sell your product, and at the same time giving a negative, disrespectful, realistic version that acting this way is normal. Carrying guns, looking to smoke somebody, shoot somebody, carrying drugs on you constantly. Again, if you feel like a generation of people have to wake up in the morning and they have to have a blunt, marijuana, weed, and beer, and other forms of substances just to get the day started, they're not thinking about a job or a business or trying to do something, developing in their community. It's just one form of interacting from one day to the next day. It's something. Is it a subculture or is it something else? So again, you have to be able to examine what you're dealing with in your society. If you want to sweep this segment of your population away and let them continue to feel that the way they're behaving is the way that they should behave, it's normal, we're not challenging ourselves as a society. I think it is good when you have different cultures that exist in our society. It makes life more interesting. It gives sense of learning ways to interact and adapt to people. But when you're to the point now that you have to break the law and destroy families in the process to assimilate your so-called culture or a subculture, then I think that's when it's gone too far. So this is a real topic that I think might draw some controversy. I definitely want to get some information beyond what I've been able to run across about the so-called subculture that exists here in our society. I think the entertainment arena just gives a marketing strategy that you can utilize to show people and make a profit on, the way a segment of your population can interact and function. I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing the hip hop game. I think the hip hop game has been instrumental in many different aspects, providing opportunities for people that would not have had opportunity. But at the same time, you weigh the pros and cons. Is it doing more damage? Is this part of something that we need to look into as a subculture or some form that is not to the best interest of our society? I think it's a topic that I would advocate to continue to work towards figuring out exactly what is this form of a behavior. Is this a normal behavior pattern or is this a subculture? Look at the movie if you can get a chance, if you can go online or you can get a copy of the DVD tape. I think it was a very realistic picture, streets. I will say at that. It's up to you to determine, is it a good movie or a bad movie? But one thing you will learn about the movie, it is a different so-called subculture or a different way of acting and talking and carrying yourself that in the 9-to-5 traditional corporate world or the business world, it's not going to be able to function, because two different worlds can't function when one world can't understand what the other world is saying or doing or why they're doing, And again, I really want to get into this topic a little bit more. I do want to continue with the small report, updating people on information, but I definitely want to get this particular issue or topic addressed today. A subculture. Is this something real or is this something made up? I enjoyed myself today doing the small report. This is again Jonathan Small. I thank my executive producer for putting this format together. I plan to do a follow-up if I feel it's needed on this so-called subculture. And I think everybody out there needs to open their eyes and look into this. And I wish everybody over the internet, airways, to have a very good day. And until the next time, stay blessed and keep the faith. Again, this is Jonathan. Thank you.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Do it like this. Ba-boom. Ba-boom. Do it like that.